Good morning, good afternoon. If anyone has joined yet, we'll be starting in a few minutes. It's a couple of minutes before 12, so please stand by for a few minutes. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. It's just about 12 o'clock and there seems to be a few more people logging on, so please stand by and we'll get started in a few moments. Thanks. Hello, everyone. Please stand by. It's 12 o'clock right now, and I see that there are some more people logging on. So we'll get started in just another minute or two. Thank you. Okay, so let's get started. Welcome to the webinar. I'm sure everyone's excited to learn about RPA, Robotic Process Automation, and thank you so much for joining us today on this 45-minute webinar. So let's get started. Let me start by introducing myself. My name is Chris Drager. I am an account executive at RoboWorks Incorporated. We are an RPA company, and I'm happy to talk to you about RPA today. So what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about what is RPA. We keep hearing about automation and robots coming, and how does RPA fit in that scheme? And then we'll talk a little bit about how RPA can help you and your organization. We then have an RPA Diagnostic Checklist, which is a fancy word for how do you evaluate which processes would be good processes to automate, which would be good candidates. We then have a demo, so we can show you a robot in action, and an ROI calculator, because RPA is a really good tool for generating ROI for your organizations. Then at the end, we'll have a Q&A, so please feel free to type your questions into the Q&A throughout the presentation. And I'll be talking for about 30 minutes, and we have 15 minutes allocated at the end, so I'll answer all of your questions today. Okay, so let's get started. What is RPA? So when you think about RPA, you really have to think about how it fits into the big picture. We're all hearing about automation. It's the new wave in technology. It's taking over our lives, and it's taking over business, right? So how does RPA fit in the big scheme of things? And this shows you how to think about that. So if you think about where we are today, for any company that's not using any automation tools right now, they're using traditional BPA, business process management, and operations and tasks are being carried out by human workers, right? That's what we're all used to. The next level of automation is what we call robotic processing automation, RPA. And this is where we use digital robots. They're not real robots. It's not R2-D2 and C3PO. It's actually software. But what it does is it automates repetitive tasks that human workers are doing today. And I'm going to talk a lot more about that in the next few minutes. But just again, to put it in the bigger context, it's kind of an entry-level way to start thinking about automation. And then it starts to move into more complex areas of automation. So as you get more complex, you're moving from rules-based automation, where the robot doesn't think, it just does exactly what you tell it to do. And you start to move into judgment-based automation and cognitive computing, where it's simulating human thought to solve complex problems, and machine learning, where it's looking at big data and looking for patterns to solve problems. And then ultimately the holy grail of automation, which is artificial intelligence, where it's simulating to think like humans. So that's where RPA fits in the big picture of automation. So what is it and what is it not? What it is, it's the emulation of human workers' repetitive tasks through a user interface. So what does that mean? That means every day, those of us who work in an office, we sit at our computer and we push buttons and we open up email and we open up proprietary databases and we copy and paste information through a user interface. That's what RPA mimics. It automates these activities, and it does it across multiple functions, multiple interfaces, and different business units, and it processes data to and from those systems. What it's not, so like I said, it's not R2-D2, it's not C3CPO, it's not artificial intelligence, because it's not thinking, it's doing. And it's definitely not a digital workforce that's replacing human beings. It complements human beings. And what it does is it takes care of those mundane, repetitive tasks that human workers are doing every day, so that they can then focus on more strategic projects that add more value to your organization. So what are the benefits of RPA? Let's look at those. There are so many benefits. It's crazy. So I'll start up here on the dark green where it says ease of entry. And if you think about the slide I showed a few moments ago, where RPA is the entry level into automation, that's what this means by ease of entry. It's not very disruptive to IT. It's a low cost of entry. So it's a really good way to get started with automation. Once you're up and running, what you've got is a digital worker working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, never takes a break, never gets tired, never gets sick. He's just, I'll call the robot he for the sake of argument here. He's just working constantly. So you get, as a result of that, you get higher productivity, and you're getting more accurate results of the processes, because we all know that we are human and we all make errors. And most of us know that when you automate, you have fewer errors. So as a result of that, you're getting higher accuracy when you're processing these mundane tasks. Compliance, another really good benefit of RPA. Why is that? That's because when the robot completes its task, it's leaving behind an audit trail. So everything is documented in paper and everything is available to provide to any compliance regulatory authorities that need to have paperwork in the background. Another benefit of this is employee retention, and that might seem like an oxymoron, but it's actually true. We have customers, and when we first bring in the robots, some people get a bit apprehensive about it, but what we find is they love it. They love it. The younger generation today really embraces technology, and they really want to move up and grow in their organization. So what we find is a lot of the employees say, hey, let the robot do the boring stuff. Let them do the repetitive work. I want to be more strategic. I want to have a bigger impact on the organization. And then we find that it becomes contagious. I want a bot. I want a bot. So it does help with employee retention. And then all these other things follow along with it, right? You have happier customers. Why? Because things are being produced faster. There's less mistakes. There's more automation. You can respond to customers quicker, and you can start to offer them more products and services because you've got people freed up to work on these more strategic projects. I mentioned the low initial investment, and because of all that, you can get a quick ROI. Very easy to calculate the ROI, and I'm going to show you that in an upcoming slide. And then there's competitive advantage. I mean, obviously, if you've got higher productivity, more accuracy, you're compliant, and you've got happy customers, and ROI, that's going to give you a competitive advantage. So those are the benefits of RPA. And this is a real kind of specific example of what the RPA robots, the bots, what they actually do, right? So they can mimic anything I'm typing on my computer that a human worker can do. They come in the morning, they open their email, they log in, then they go in and they copy and paste data. They take a folder and move it from one application into another application. They open a PDF. They potentially could use optical character recognition, OCR software to read PDF documents, open up databases, scrape data from the website or from an intranet. At its most basic level, it's kind of moving around and copying, pasting. Then it starts to become more complex, where the robot starts to make decisions. One example of that, the easiest example, would be accounts payable. Accounts payable happens to be one of the most popular tasks that are automated with RPA. It's kind of the most popular process. So let's say you have a software robot, a bot we like to call it, and we say, okay, bot, we want you to take the purchase order and extract that from the email in Outlook, take that, look at the amount that was signed off on, then go and retrieve the invoice from any application that it's coming into, SAP, Oracle, CRM, Salesforce, whatever it might be, and compare the two. And then we'll say to the robot, if the amount approved on the purchase order is within 4% of the invoice, then go ahead and process the payment. But if it exceeds that 3 or 4% threshold, then we want you to take another path, and we want you to send an exception alert to the accounts payable manager. So that's an example of how a robot can make a calculation, and where you start to call that a little bit of a more complex process. The robot can still do it, but one way that we define the bots is through simple versus complex. So that's what the bot does 24/7, 365. And there are so many examples of what the robot can accomplish. It's almost, you can't even cite them all, because as I talk to customers and prospects in different departments, and I talk to them about what their particular pain point is or what problem they're trying to solve, And when they learn about RPA, they say, hey, maybe the robot can help with that. But these are some of the more common ones. I mentioned accounts payable is very popular. Insurance is very popular. RPA also works very well in industries that rely on legacy IT systems. So, kind of these legacy ERP systems, which can be quite rigid, but cannot be changed because they're so embedded within an organization. The bot works really, really well in that environment because the bot is not replacing any kind of ERP. Instead, it's kind of logging into that ERP. It is logging into that ERP, taking whatever information it needs, pasting whatever information it needs. Another way to think about how RPA works is if anyone is familiar with Excel macros. They were very popular with Excel when Microsoft was kind of the game changer back in the day. And what the Excel macro would do is it would mimic the steps that you would take within Excel. So sometimes we like to describe RPA as an Excel macro on steroids, because it's not only mimicking what you're doing in Excel, but the robot can obviously work in any application that a human worker could log into with a keystroke and a password, the robot can do as well. Okay, so let's move on. So now that you know what RPA is, I thought it might just be helpful for you to understand how quickly it's growing. So I mentioned that, Microsoft was a game changer in its day in late 80s, 90s. Then it was the cloud, right? It was all about software as a service and hosting virtually, kind of changed the technology landscape. RPA falls within that evolution of technology, as does automation. It's been adapted quite heavily in Asia Pacific and EMEA, or particularly Europe, and it's gaining ground very quickly in the United States. So you can see the potential growth projected for 2025. And I mention this because your competitors will be using it, and any company that is adapting to it sooner rather than later is going to realize a competitive advantage. Okay, so now that we all know what RPA is, how can RPA help you? And how can RPA help your organization? So here's the beauty of RPA. It can be used across departments. And even this is just an example because every industry has its own unique set of processes and needs and technology systems that they rely on. But these are some of the more common ways that RPA is used. So I'll just start with sales and marketing, for example. I personally have a marketing background, so take list building, for example, or cleansing, right? Marketing people work with databases with 10, 20, 50,000 names on it. And then they need to do targeted marketing campaigns. But how do you segment the database, right? So the robot can help you take a marketing list, for example, and make the fields consistent so that you can identify different industries and different personas. And finance, the most popular by far, I would say, usually, not usually, but quite often the process that companies start out with. Accounts payable, I already talked a little bit about that. And I'll mention SAP and Oracle because technologies such as SAP and Oracle are widely used in many organizations. RPA has some technology built into it that enables it to work with SAP and Oracle. It's got pre-built instructions for working with those. Other examples might be Salesforce, and any of the big technologies that people use. The bot has a lot of experience with those. Supply chain is another really good example. IT is another example. IT people love RPA because not only can it help them with their day-to-day world, which consists of quite a few repetitive tasks, password resets, antivirus administration, all these things we're always going to the IT department for. But in addition to that, if you think about the pain points that someone in IT might have. It's that the finance department is calling them and saying, I need help automating my accounts payable. Or the HR people are calling and saying, help me screen all these resumes. I need to find a way to whittle down my 150 resumes and applications to the ones that I really need to look at. So that's IT. HR is a big one. I mentioned the resume filtering. Payroll. RPA is perfect for payroll, which is rules-based. You know, depending on tax brackets, the bot can be given rules about deductions and so on and so forth. And then customer service is a big one. Anyone who runs a customer service call center usually knows, probably it's an 80-20 rule. Maybe 80% of the calls are coming in for an address change, and it's taking so much time, but it's really not adding a lot of value, but it needs to be done. So those kinds of things, password resets can all be automated. I'm sure some of us have been on the receiving end of that these days, where they're finding that robots are responding to them when they call. So those would be a good example of using RPA in a customer service environment. Okay, so now that you understand what RPA is and how it can be used, where do you start, right? Where do you start? So what we put together for you here is an RPA Diagnostic Checklist. And basically what we're saying here is, you should think about maybe 5-10 processes that you think would work well for RPA, and then run it against this checklist and see if it meets these criteria. So the first one is it repetitive? So the process is following a set of predefined steps. If it's A, then B. Log into this, if that. If the PO is within the range of the invoice, process the payment, etc. So it needs to be repetitive. It needs to be a standardized process. The triggers and inputs need to be standard. Now, a more complex robot can work outside of the standardization. There's definitely complex solutions because the bot can be customized with special coding, but it's usually better to start with something that's more defined. The third one is about reason-based, and this goes back to what I mentioned early in the presentation. The robot doesn't think. The robot is not going to make any decisions for you. So it has to be non-judgmental. The fourth one is the process should be stable. So if you're wanting the RPA robot to execute accounts payable, but you know that you're going to change your accounts payable process soon, it's probably not the best candidate. Or if there tends to be a lot of upgrades or bugs in the system, probably not the best candidate. Because once the robot has been given the instructions, if anything changes in that interface, then the robot just needs to be told about that, if they have to click on an extra button or whatever the case may be. That doesn't mean the robot can't execute it, but it's better to start with a stable process. And then the last one is just a reminder that the robot does not respond to voice commands. So it's all about keystrokes. The whole process is based around mimicking buttons that you're pressing on a computer. And then the last part of the RPA Diagnostic Checklist relates to your return on investment goals, right? So can RPA work under a lot of scenarios? Absolutely, right? But you're not going to want to do it if you're not going to get an ROI on it. And when it comes to ROI, every organization is going to have their own goals and their own culture. Some of our clients come to us and say, I've got one big process. It's taking up so much time. It's such a headache. I really want to start there. And we say, great, let's do it. Other companies will say, listen, we're in this for the long haul. You know, we have a lot of objectives. We believe in automation. We realize it might take a little bit longer to get there. So we do want ROI, but we don't have an expectation that it's going to take place in 3 to 6 months. It's going to take 12 to 18 months, and that's fine too. But the point here is that as you evaluate which processes to start with, you think about what your ROI goals are. Okay, so let's show you a robot in action, and it speaks for itself. So actually, I'll just give you a really quick introduction. So we had a marketing VP come to us, and she said that she came across this website that had a list of all the government contractors in the United States, and she wanted to market to them. So she was excited because it had email addresses, contact names, phone numbers, everything that this lady needed, but it was on a website. And for her to copy and paste it or have her team copy and paste it would have taken a long time, a lot of marketing coordinators. And she said, can you help me with automation? So let me show you what that looks like.
Welcome to RoboWorks, a UiPath certified partner and leader in robotics process automation. From the initial project discovery meeting through project completion and beyond, the RoboWorks team of RPA professionals will help your business simplify its processes, deliver better products and services, and achieve goals faster. We're here with you every step of the way during your automation journey. From our team at RoboWorks, we welcome you to this video demonstration of how our bots work.
In this short video, you will see a bot in action, customized to perform a mundane task with unmatched pace and accuracy. This simple bot was designed to operate multiple applications, navigate the GSA database, and extract contractor information into an Excel spreadsheet. A great characteristic is that these bots can run during off hours, providing you with a report when you return to work the next day. Notice how quickly this is done with 0 errors. In 12 hours, this bot created over 8,000 contact records, populating over 100,000 data points. The output is a spreadsheet, but more importantly is a valuable marketing resource containing information on thousands of potential clients. The value of this list comes from the organized display of prospects' names, telephone numbers, and email addresses. The sales and marketing team can now use this report to develop their next plan of action. They will no longer spend time gathering and organizing these reports, but can be refocused on engaging in more value-adding activities. This example is just one use case and can be catered to individual needs of many business processes. Now that you have an idea of how these bots work, where can you see them assisting you in your operations? Allow our team to lead you on your automation journey, select the best task to automate, and let the bot do it.
Okay, so let the bot do it. So hopefully you could all see that and hear that well, where our robot was able to go to the government website, copy and paste the contact information for government contractors so that the marketing person was able to import that list into her email automation system and start sending out campaigns to them. It took 12 hours, but the reason that happened is because the robot is kind of at the website's mercy. If the website doesn't load quickly, then the robot has to wait. So every time it clicked to a new page to access information, it would wait for the website to respond. In theory, if the website had responded as quickly as the robot, the process time could have gone from 12 hours to 2 or 3. But even 12 hours, any person who would kick off the bot at the end of the day and go about enjoying the evening and then log in the next morning, the process would be done. So that's a robot in action. And now I'm just going to talk a little bit about an approach to deploying the robots. And like many technology solutions, it often makes sense to start with a crawl, walk, run approach. And if you look at the text here, you'll see the difference. In a crawl scenario, you just start with one process. Walk would be 2 to 5 processes, run 5. Crawl, highly repetitive process. Walk, somewhat repetitive. Run, less repetitive, etc., etc. Crawl, a non-complex, meaning it doesn't have a lot of steps. It doesn't require a lot of calculations, a lot of if, then, and or scenarios, and so on and so forth. So that's not to say that the run scenarios cannot be achieved. They absolutely can. But what we recommend to anyone who's beginning their RPA journey to just start with a crawl scenario, and this would be the kind of process that they'd be looking for. And then obviously fly, we don't want to leave that off. That's where you start getting into automation, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and all of those areas that we talked about earlier. Okay, so sorry, my mouse is getting tricky there. Just some pitfalls, right? Because RPA is relatively new in the United States, although growing quickly. But these are just some areas to look out for as you deploy RPA that you want to avoid so you don't end up in the bottom of the ditch like that poor little robot there. So number one is a pitfall would be not selecting the right process. So I talked a lot today about what type of processes are best suited for RPA, at least at the beginning. So we did that on purpose because it's really, really important that you choose the right process. If you choose the wrong one and something goes wrong, then you might feel like RPA doesn't work, and that's not true. So it's really important to pick the right one. And number two is related to number one, which is trying to automate too many steps. So once you get serious about RPA, the first thing you're going to do is sit down with a business analyst and map out every single step in the process. And then you're going to say, oh, I want to automate the whole thing. And that could be done for sure. But in order to have the most success, it might make sense to take that process from beginning to end and just choose a piece of it or a significant part of it, but maybe not the whole thing, which is too many steps and something might go wrong, and better to just start with elements of it. And again, it all depends on internal processes and culture, but that's something to keep in mind. The next one is stakeholder engagement and change management and, involving HR and that whole area. Stakeholder engagement, I would say, consists of probably 3 groups. One would be you want C-level engagement. This technology is not necessarily disruptive, but it changes things. It's relying on software to manage what human workers are doing. So you definitely want to get C-level engagement. You absolutely need to have department head involvement, right? So if it's an accounts payable process, the head of the finance department or the accounts payable department really needs to believe in this and be on board. And then HR as well. And we could do a whole presentation on HR because HR can really use this as a way to enhance employee engagement, but it needs to be managed properly. The fourth potential pitfall is thinking that, let's just hand this over to IT and let them handle it, right? Oftentimes that's what we do. We get a new piece of software and we say, IT will get it up and they'll get us trained. That's not how this works. This is a software that's impacting each different department who's using it. So it's really a partnership between IT and the department. And finally, underestimating the skills required. So again, RPA is relatively new in the United States. There's high demand for people who have skills in RPA. It is a specialized skill. And depending on what kind of partner an organization uses for RPA, they may outsource a lot of those skills. A lot of times when our clients start to add more robots and they've got 5, 10, 15 robots up and running, at that point they might take it in-house and hire some specialists internally to manage all of those robots. But it's just important to remember that, you know, if you're outsourcing it, it might be easier because you know that you're getting people who have those skills. But it's not as simple as, I'll just hire somebody to do it, right? It's a little bit trickier than that. Okay, I'm approaching my 30 minutes, so I've got one more slide here to cover. So ROI, right? We all love ROI. We all love ROI Calculator. So let me just talk a little bit about the return on investment that you can get through RPA. The most basic way is the same calculation that we would use in any ROI calculation, right? You're looking at your costs minus your investment and dividing it, and then you come up with a number. So it works the same way. It's ROI. But then the question becomes, what figures do I use in that equation? So what I tried to do here is just give you some things to think about in terms of what would impact those costs. So the first one here says the cost to complete the task. So if the ROI is going to come because the human worker doesn't have to spend the time to process these tasks, then you have to say to yourself, well, how much am I paying them to process them today? That's going to be the most expensive part of the process, what you're paying those people, those workers. So how do you do that? You look at the number of hours it takes them to do it. How many employees are working on it? How much are you paying them? What percentage of their time are they spending on these tasks? And when you start to look at those numbers, then you can come up with either a weekly, monthly, or annual number of hours and cost that it takes to perform those tasks. The second part of the equation is your RPA investment, right? How much do those bots cost anyway, right? That depends. It depends on a lot. One of the first areas that impact the cost are whether they are simple or complex tasks. And I tried to give you some examples of those throughout this presentation. If the task is quite simple and the robot is logging into email, copying and pasting information into an Excel spreadsheet, saving that spreadsheet and emailing it to the team, that's a pretty easy task, not going to cost a lot. If the robot is performing a complex accounts payable process and it's been given instructions to look at the PO and compare it to the invoice, upload the general ledger in SAP, for example, provide any, have some if-then scenarios. If it doesn't match, send an exceptions report to the accounts payable manager, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's where it starts to get what we call complex. And that's just going to take longer to map out the process and to build the instructions for the robot. So it would cost a little bit more. The next area that could influence the RPA investment is just hosting it. And I didn't get into this too much today, but there are a variety of ways that you can host the robot, like any software. It could be done on premise in your own organization. If you've got high security rules and you need to manage everything in-house, that's certainly an option. And you would evaluate your own costs for doing that with RPA. There's always the option of hosting it on a private cloud or a public cloud. Lots of RPA providers such as RoboWorks will provide that service for you. But obviously there would be a cost associated with that. So that would have an impact on the cost of the bot. And then support. Some of our clients at RoboWorks only require support 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. Other clients are very much 24/7, 365 organizations and require tier 1 support. And companies will lend that support by all means, but again, there would be a cost associated with that. So those are some of the examples of what would influence the RPA investment. Another important note here is the indirect savings that you would get as a result of implementing the robots. So once the robots are up and running, you've got your human workers who are really anxious now to work on strategic projects and more interesting projects. So at that point, it becomes kind of an internal cultural issue. How do you reallocate those human resources? It could be an attrition example, but in most cases, it's retraining, and this is where HR could get involved. And once those decisions are made and you've reallocated their tasks, then you'll start to see value from what they're doing, right? So then you're increasing your ROI even more. Last point, and then I'm going to show you the calculator real quick, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. But just like to make sure everyone understands how the ROI gets better and better every year, right? And why is that? It's just your total cost of ownership, your cost the first year versus the total life cycle. So in year one, you've got 4 sets of costs. The documents have to be processed. It needs to be developed and coded. There's software and maintenance fees. But then once you get into year 2 and 3, obviously you don't have to pay for the development and the process documentation. So because of that, your RPA costs are going to be less, right? You still got your license fees and your maintenance fees, but it costs less. So that means every year that the bot's running, you'll see an even better and better ROI. Okay, so having said that, let me show you this tool. And I'll preface it by saying that this is directional, right? It's going to depend on all of the things I was talking about today, but at least it gives you an idea of how to calculate the ROI. And, a lot of partners and RPA companies, such as RoboWorks, will help you create a customized ROI. So it's basically based on the number of processes that can be automated. And by the way, one robot can handle many, many processes. Don't think that one robot equals one process, because it doesn't work that way at all. Again, the robot is working 24/7, 365 in milliseconds. So imagine how many processes he could process. So you're looking at how many processes, how many employees are working on it right now, what their average salary is, and what percentage of time they're spending, right? And basically the whole idea of this left portion of the calculator is to get you this. How many hours per year is it taking right now? That's what you want to know. And then how much is it costing you to pay them to do that, right? So you'll see how it goes down as you have fewer employees. Then you take your investment, and the investment I used in this calculator, again, is very generic. It's not a simple process. It's not a complex process. It's somewhere in the middle. But the investment is going to depend on all those things I talked about earlier. So then you can start to see your savings and your actual savings percentage in year 1. And in year 2, you can start to see that it goes up. Okay, so that is the conclusion of the presentation. And I'd like to open it up. I've only got 5 or 6 minutes left, but I'd like to open it up to any questions. So I see the QA here. Will you send the deck via email? Absolutely, I will send it. I will send this out. We're actually recording this webinar, so I will send you the video as well as the presentation if you'd like. Okay, next question. I'm concerned about the employees thinking that they are going to lose their jobs. We get that question all the time. The robots are scary, right? The bots are coming, the bots are coming, the bots are coming. And as I mentioned earlier in the webinar, There will be that fear, but there are ways to get around it, and we also find that in reality, that's not the case. What we find is the robots, especially the younger ones, not to single them out, but the millennials and the Gen Zs who grew up with technology, they're not intimidated by it. They say, I would love for a robot to do this work for me. So the most important thing you can do to combat that concern is get HR involved early, have a strategy for reskilling the workers, and have a change management plan in place. And eventually you will find that the robots are contagious and everyone says, I want a bot, I want a bot. Okay, what security issues may arise when using RPA? It's like any technology, right? I can tell you that RPA uses all the latest and greatest security tools are built in. So all of those are in place. And then you've got your hosting issues. So you want to, if you wanted to use a private cloud-based server to enhance security, you could have that as well. And that's also another example of where IT would be involved, because you want to make sure that any passwords were secure. If you needed to use encryption, you could. But that's a really good example of where the RPA provider would work closely with your IT department to make sure that all the security issues are applied. Someone's asking me about a partnership. We do work with partners. In case there's any types of partners on the call, we work with government contractors and added value resellers, and we'd love to talk to any of you about that. We have some robust programs relating to that. And Gartner's market adoption trends. Gartner just keeps talking about how quickly that RPA is growing, you know, and they're all making huge predictions for growth in the United States. And financial, insurance, healthcare tend to lead the pack in terms of those industries that are adopting it the fastest. And that's because of two reasons. One is they tend to have a lot of repetitive tasks that help them achieve ROI. And in addition to that, as I mentioned earlier, many of them use legacy systems, IT legacy systems from, you know, before the 2000s. And RPA is an excellent tool that works well within those types of technologies. Okay, I don't see any more questions. I have about 1 minute left if anyone else wants to ask anything. I'm not seeing anything else. Okay, I'm just about at the top of my 45 minutes. It's exactly 12:45. So thank you all very, very much. Let me just say in conclusion that, again, my name is Chris Drager. I work for RoboWorks, and my contact information is here. I will reach out to you after the webinar, just in case you'd like to talk further about it or if you have any questions. And we'd love to offer you a proof of concept, which is a very low-cost way to start testing the robot and give it a shot. You know, everyone loves the bot once they give it a try. So I look forward to speaking to you in the future, and please feel free to reach out to me directly if I can answer any questions at all. Thank you all, and have an awesome day and a wonderful weekend. Thank you.